Hey guys, and welcome to another podcast. So, this is like the third time I've actually had to record this due to some technical difficulties with my phone, but we're going to give this another go. So, I know I'm like a day late on these podcasts. Usually these come out Tuesday, so this is Wednesday, but not a big deal. We're going to roll with it anyway. First of all, though, who out there has been playing Pokemon Go and freaking loves it as much as I do? Brings back so much nostalgic moments for us '90s babies, and it's good, such a good time. It's good cardio too. I mean, I don't do much cardio, and my cardio in the past like 5 days has gone up like through the roof, due to that game. So anyway, though, let's get back on topic. Today's topic is specificity and why it's important to know that for your gains. So, first of all, I want to go into what specificity is because I have a feeling not very many, well, I have a feeling a lot of people know, but not a lot of people know what it means in terms of lifting. So, specificity in key of lifting is being proficient at the thing that you compete in, or being proficient at your main goal, your main focus. So, for example, specificity for a power lifter is the bench, squat, and deadlift. A powerlifter needs to be proficient in those moves. Olympic lifter might have specificity being a clean and jerk, a snatch, and whatever else they do. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with weightlifting terms, or CrossFit terms for that matter. But you get the point. Specificity is the main thing that your sport is consisting of. You know, a volleyball player, their specificity is playing volleyball. Basketball player, their specificity is playing basketball. But now you notice though, these different sports, they get better by not just doing specificity, but they also throw in things around that to complement specificity. So, for example, like basketball, for example, they might have days where they do sprints. They might have days where they lift. Their ultimate goal is to be better at basketball, but they have alternated in, lifting and sprints to up their level for specificity, but they are always keeping a specificity component in their training. So, specificity and why it's important to your gains is this is going to kind of go into another kind of topic of conjugate, because I did a video a podcast a while back talking about conjugate in my review, and I think some people got the hint that I'm not a fan of conjugate. And to a degree, I'm not really a fan of conjugate. I believe that there's more disadvantages to advantages of conjugate. But one thing that is kind of a neat concept, though, is the fact that you vary your specificity by using alterations and variations to make your specific lift stronger. So squats, you would do maybe front squats or something like that. You do another variation to get stronger. Now, here's where the problems arise. So, when talking about, like, say, West Side, for example, West Side conjugate system barely ever, if ever, do the main movement in their training. They save that for the platform. I personally do not think that's the way to go. I personally don't think it's the way to be the most proficient. For example, I dare you to take off, if you're used to, say, squatting regular squat, competition stance 3 times a week, I dare you to not squat in that stance for a week, squat in any other stance, any other position, but not your main stance, and then the next week, try coming back to that. I guarantee that you're going to have a terrible first squat session back at your competition stance because you're not familiar with that movement. Now, a week is not that long time, but you get the point that I'm trying to go through. You get that I'm trying to say, if you don't practice what you're going to be competing in, then that's just like a sport. It's honestly just like a sport. Would a basketball player just do sprints and weightlifting and not play basketball? Absolutely not. Most of their training would be specific to what they have to do on game day, and that is specificity. So, trying to build a training program around just variations is not the best way to do things, in my opinion. If you're just doing variations of your main movement, and then on meet day or test day, whatever your day is, you're not going to be proficient at that movement, or as proficient as you could have been if you would have stuck with it. That's one of the pros of staying very specific in your sport, being specific with your goals and keeping that through and the main focus in your training program. So now I want to talk a little bit how you can use specificity to get stronger, but also include variations to assist those movements. So my concept of this is use your main focus, your main energy for the day on your main movement, your main competition stance specificity movement. If, for example, if you're a low bar back squatter, you do your low bar back squat and you hit your sets, whatever that may be, and then after your main movement, then hit a variation for maybe like half the sets of that first one. So let's say you did 5 sets of 5 on your squat. Your accessory movement would be a variation of that. So let's say you do front squats, something that targets the opposite end. So, low bar back squats they target your glutes, your posterior chain a lot more than your anterior chain, anterior being front. So a good way to substitute that would be front squats. So you're doing totally the opposite. You're working more on the anterior, your quads. For that movement, I would recommend maybe cutting the sets down. So maybe like do a 3x5. Or maybe if you wanted to do more reps, you could do a 3x8 or 3x9 in there. That is personally how I go about it. And then you can add in, other accessory exercises after that. That way, though, you are being specific with your main movement and you're not having to use as much energy for your alternate movement, but you're still able to throw in, variations afterwards to keep things interesting and to build upon those so-called weak spots in your lifts. People sometimes ask me, Sean, what do I do about a weak point in my lift? I tell people to do that lift more. If you have a sticking point on lockout on deadlift, a lot of people say, rack pulls, do rack pulls. Well, here's the thing. You can put almost any weight on rack pulls, and if it's above the knee, I guarantee you'll be able to lock that out. But if you're not pulling from the ground to lock that out, you're not strengthening that entire movement. So what I recommend is if you have a sticking point and you've only been lifting maybe say 3 to 5 years, I say just do more of that movement to get stronger. You'll eventually blow past those sticking points. Now, when variations can help you get past this sticking point is later on in your lifting career. Say you've been lifting more than 5 years and you have a trouble on lockout on bench or something. Then you are pretty proficient in the movement. You've been training for 5 to 8 years. You're pretty proficient in that main specificity. That is when you can add in more variations to try to strengthen your main movement. So doing more lockout work, pin presses, floor presses, stuff like that. So it all comes down to how long you've been training. The more longer you train, the more non-specific work you can do to improve. But I always recommend still keeping in specificity in your training. Newer lifters, I recommend be super, super specific. Keep specificity as the main target for lifting. And that's why, new lifters will have very boring looking programs. Squat, bench, deadlift. Squat, bench, deadlift. Squat, bench, deadlift. It's because they work and you need to get proficient at those movements in that over years to actually get to a point where you need to add variations. Now, I'm not saying new lifters can't add variations. You can add variations. That's completely fine. But you need to focus on specificity when you're in that first 3 to 5 years of lifting. After that first 3 to 5 years, you can feel free to put more emphasis on other conjugate types of styles to try to get past those sticking points in your lifts that you may come through. But if you're just new to beginning, I recommend staying very specific. And it doesn't have to be boring. Daily undulating periodization is great because it mixes up the rep schemes. One day you do 9 reps. Next day you do 5 reps. And the last day, 9, 7, 5. So first day you do 9. The next time you do squats, you do 7. And the next day you do 5s. And then you could do 3s. If you did 4 days. Whatever it may be, however you may undulate the reps, daily undulating periodization is a great way for beginners. As long as you appropriately go on volume. Volume is is pretty important to keep in mind too. If you're just used to squatting 1 time a week, like I've talked about many times, don't go squatting 4 times a week. Up volume slowly over time. And that just goes into other videos, and that's going to go into another rant. So I'm going to cap it there before this ends up ridiculous. But just to sum this up, newer lifters, stay very specific. And if you've been training more than 5 years, you can feel free to get outside your box a little bit, add in more variations when you need to. But I still always recommend everybody train specific to what they're doing for their sport, whatever it may be. Even if you're a powerlifter that doesn't compete, you still are trying to progress. Your goal is to get stronger at the squat, bench, deadlift, so you need that specificity in there. So that's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed this. Give this podcast a like. Check out SeanFollies.com every week for the Thursday blog, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Enjoy Pokemon Go.